This is Books of Titans, the podcast dedicated to the influences of influencers. The books that have helped shape prominent inventors, business leaders, athletes, intellectuals, scientists, and others. We'll talk about what makes these books such classics, and at least attempt to have an intelligent discussion about what makes them so important and influential.
Hello, this is Erik Rostad. I'm coming to you right outside of a rainy Nashville, Tennessee. Today I'm going to cover The War of Art by Steven Pressfield, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles. This was book 47 of 52 for my 2017 reading list. This episode will consist of 3 segments. The first will be a brief introduction to the book. The second segment will be, I'll just cover 3 different themes that stuck out to me throughout the book. And then the final segment, segment 3, is the one thing, my one key takeaway from this book. So on to segment 1. Steven Pressfield is the author. He's 75 years old, and according to him, and according to what he writes in this book, his early life was a series of failures. He lost his wife, he lost his family. He was a writer, but he just went many, many years without ever publishing anything. He finally published The Legend of Bagger Vance, and that was turned into a movie. You may have seen that movie. It starred Will Smith and Matt Damon. He's also the author of another Books of Titans book from my 2017 reading list, and that was Gates of Fire, which is about the Spartans and the Battle of Thermopylae. That book is, interestingly, it's taught at the U.S. Military Academy, the Marine Corps Basic School at Quantico, and the United States Naval Academy. So that's pretty cool. As for who suggested the book, 4 different people did. They are Ryan Holiday, Brian Koppelman, Seth Godin, and Daniel Pink. And they suggested the book on the Tim Ferriss Show podcast. So really, the genesis for this Books of Titans project was I made a list of books that had been suggested within Tools of Titans. So that's how I got the name Books of Titans. But Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss, where he basically kind of summarized different podcast episodes. And one of the questions he would ask all of his guests is, what is your favorite book, and what is the book that you've gifted to others the most? So those 4 people I just mentioned, they had either gifted this book the most to others or said it was their favorite book. I read this book in December of 2017. It's a quick read. It's 163 pages, but a lot of the pages have just one paragraph on them. So I finished the book in under 2 hours. And that's a really cool thing about this book because it packs quite a punch in a very short amount of time. As for who should read the book, definitely creatives. Just take the 2 hours to read the book because it will have an immediate impact. But beyond that, it's a good book for anyone who is struggling to get past a barrier in their life. I mean, if you're feeling stuck in any sense, in terms of something that you want to accomplish, this book identifies the problem. It identifies the thing that is keeping you stuck, and then provides advice, information, stories on how to get past that. So I'll go into more depth into that in segment 2, but definitely a great book for creatives, but then anyone who really wants to improve in their life. Now on to segment 2, where I highlight 3 different ideas that really stuck out to me as I was reading this book. The first is that of resistance. If you've ever heard anyone talk about this book, you've likely heard them mention the resistance. It's really the key idea of the book. It's the thing holding us back. And here's how he defines it in the intro of the book. Most of us have 2 lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between the 2 stands resistance. So you go to work, you do your thing every day, you come home and maybe you're with your family or you're meeting up with friends, and you just day in, day out, you're doing that. But then there's this unlived life, there's this potential life, there's this challenge, this call to adventure, and that's the unlived life within us. And to get to that, you've got to overcome resistance. And Pressfield says that resistance is fertile, not futile, which is the saying we always hear but fertile. It's abundant. And you have likely experienced this if you've sat down to work on a project, to maybe start writing a song or a book, some creative endeavor, or some challenge that you know will get you to the next step. You have likely experienced this resistance, and you have experienced it in a strong way because it is powerful. And Pressfield says it is internal. It's not external. It's not somebody saying that you can't do something, but it is internal. It's your own mind telling you you can't do it. It's fear within yourself. It's procrastination. It's a number of different things that you could do instead of what you know you need to do. So where do you feel resistance? What do you know that you should be doing right now that you're not doing? I love this idea of resistance. It gives kind of a name to something that could be keeping us stuck. And it leads directly into the second idea from the book, and that's the idea of daily habits. And if you've been listening to the Books of Titans podcast for any period of time, you have heard this daily habits theme come up from a number of different books that have been a part of this project. It comes up all the time. And it comes up again in this book, but it comes up in a unique way. And Pressfield writes about it as being the key weapon that we have against resistance. If we show up on a daily basis to do the work, that is our greatest weapon against fear, against procrastination, against just feeling stuck. And oftentimes, just to even get started on a creative endeavor, on a project, is to just take that first step and to show up and to work through that resistance. Pressfield talks about the professional versus the amateur, and he says this about the professional. He or she knows if they cave in today, no matter how plausible the pretext, they'll be twice as likely to cave in again tomorrow. The importance of daily habits, the importance of showing up and doing the work on a day-to-day basis. The more that I give in to the resistance, the more evidence I will have from the resistance saying that I can't do something. And again, internally in my head. So the more that I give in, the more I don't do those daily habits, the more evidence that resistance will have in its arsenal to confront me. Pressfield gives a story of Somerset Maugham, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And here's what he writes. Someone once asked Somerset Maugham if he wrote on a schedule or only when struck by inspiration. And he replied, I write only when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 o'clock sharp. That's a pro. In terms of resistance, Maugham was saying, I despise resistance. I will not let it faze me. I will sit down and do my work. This is exactly why David Goggins runs every day. One time he was running and a car pulled up and asked him, what are you training for? And he said, I'm training for life. And I love that quote by Goggins, but it gets into that daily habits idea that he's got to run every day, or he knows that if he doesn't run one day, if he gives into that resistance, it will be twice as likely that he caves in the next day. The third idea that really stuck out to me was the idea of the spiritual component to creation. This book, The War of Art, was one of 3 books about creativity that I read in 2017 for this Books of Titans project. The other 2 were Bird by Bird and The Artist's Way. And all 3 of those books delved into the spiritual realm. And you have to when you're talking about creativity, because things just kind of come through you as a creative person, and you're left wondering, where did that come from? And I love that he gets into this idea in the book. And it's something that was really began to fascinate me in 2008. I started a blog in 2008. It was called Koppelman Times, and it's no longer up, but I was writing about the music industry. And at that time, I thought I was perhaps going to go into a career where I would help bands go overseas. And as part of this blog, I was really curious as to the creative process of artists. Where did their songs come from? How did they get the inspiration to write? And so I started collecting different quotes from artists and what they said when they were asked that question. And I started seeing a common theme, and that's that the artists had no idea. They didn't know where these songs came from. And they also acknowledged some sort of a spiritual dimension to the songs. And so here's just a few examples. Jay-Z, he said, "I can't explain it to y'all, man. It comes out of the air for me. I'd start mumbling. They say you put the right artist with the right track in the studio, leave the door cracked, and let God in." Chris Martin of Coldplay, he likened it to going out fishing. You throw out his line, and then you just never knew what was going to come out. My wife is a singer-songwriter, and she says when she sits down at the piano and the song will just come through her. She cannot sit down with the purpose of, I'm going to sit down and write a song. But she acknowledges that it comes through her. So she has to put in the time. She has to be available to write. But she also knows that the song comes through her. And then Handel, who wrote Messiah, when he wrote the Hallelujah chorus, he right after that he said, "I did think I did see all heaven before me and the great God himself." Page 127 of The War of Art. Pressfield says this: "Clearly some intelligence is at work, independent of our conscious mind and yet in alliance with it, processing our material for us and alongside us. That is why artists are modest. They know they're not doing the work. They're just taking dictation." And I loved that he went into this. I'm a violinist myself, and I used to play with different artists where I would just jam with them, and we'd be in a restaurant or a bar, and they would be playing songs, and I probably hadn't heard the songs a lot of the times, and so I was just kind of freestyling and jamming along with them. And I started noticing something myself, and that was that the more I thought about what I was trying to do, the more I would try to maybe compose a solo in my head or think about every note that I wanted to play, the worse the solo would be. But if I just kind of relaxed and let the solo happen through me, it would be good, and it would be things I didn't know I could play. And it goes back to this spiritual component of letting go and just letting it happen through me. And so I loved that he went into that. I love that that's a part of any creative book, and it really needs to be, because if there is creation involved, if there's something new, if there's something creative, some sort of creative endeavor, there's a component that's going to be outside of you that is part of that. So now on to segment 3, and the one key takeaway that I got from this book. And the reason I started doing this was my sister-in-law asked me, "How do you remember what you read?" And I didn't have a good answer for that at the time when she asked that. And I thought, the best way that I can remember what I'm reading is to implement something from the book. In any given book, there's going to be a number of ideas or things that you could implement. And sometimes it gets harder with fiction or novels. How do you pull one thing out to implement in your life? But books like The War of Art, you can find different things that you could immediately implement in your life. And so I figured, how do you remember what you read? If I implement something into my life that I've learned from that book, I'm going to remember it because I've changed something in my life as a result. And so anytime I think back to that, I'll remember that book, and the lessons from that book will will be more readily available. So that's really the genesis for why I do the one thing. And so the one idea from this book is to let resistance be my guide. And here's what I mean by that. If I have fear about something that I know I need to do, maybe that is my litmus test for what is most important and what I need to focus on right now. So it's almost a productivity hack in a way of what is the most important thing I need to do on my to-do list today. Perhaps it's the thing I'm most afraid of. Maybe it's the thing where I feel resistance the most. And if I let that be my guide, that will likely lead to things that I need to pursue. Maybe that's pursuing a job where I'm fearful of not having what it takes to do that job. Maybe it's in pursuing a difficult conversation that I don't want to have, but I know I need to have, and I feel the resistance pushing against having that conversation. Here's what Pressfield says about this. He says, the more important a call or action is to our soul's evolution, the more resistance we will feel towards pursuing it. This also made me think of Tim Ferriss, where he does what he calls fear testing. And he'll go into like a coffee shop and just lay on the ground for 30 seconds and then get up. And he calls it fear testing because we're all scared of doing that. I mean, like being a fool in a crowd. But if you can get over those fears, if you can break through the resistance, fear loses some of its power. And so my one key takeaway of letting resistance be my guide, I think if I start doing that, it will help get rid of the resistance for the things that I know that I need to be doing in my life. It can be a driver for what I need to be focusing on. So I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to start doing that with different areas of my life, be it work, creative endeavors, and things that I've even had friends challenge me on or encourage me to perhaps do something. But I'm fearful. I let the resistance stop me. I need to break through that and just start, even if it just means starting tomorrow and then getting that daily habit of continuing to do it. I want to end this episode with the last thing from this book. It's called The Artist's Life, and it's a few paragraphs, but it's excellent. So here we go. Are you a born writer? Were you put on the earth to be a painter, a scientist, an apostle of peace? In the end, the question can only be answered by action. Do it or don't do it. It may help to think of it in this way. If you were meant to cure cancer or write a symphony or crack cold fusion and you don't do it, you not only hurt yourself, even destroy yourself, you hurt your children. You hurt me. You hurt the planet. You shame the angels who watch over you, and you spite the Almighty, who created you and only you with your unique gifts, for the sole purpose of nudging the human race 1 millimeter farther along its path back to God. Creative work is not a selfish act or a bid for attention on the part of the actor. It's a gift to the world and every being in it. Don't cheat us of your contribution. Give us what you've got. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Before I sign off, just a reminder, you can share your reading list on the Books of Titans website. Just go to booksoftitans.com/mybooks for more details. I have 3 different plans starting at just $9 a month that allow you to share what you're reading, as well as rate and review each book. You can also follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter @Books of Titans. And if you haven't already done so, you can subscribe to this podcast and all of our past episodes through iTunes, the Android Marketplace, or your podcast manager of choice. If you're enjoying the podcast, please give us a 5-star rating in iTunes and share your favorite episodes on social media. We'll be back next week with another book, and until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.